Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Cultivated Caleb, and today we are, look, I'm not going to lie to you, it's going to be a bit rough today. Most of the stories have a negative connotation to them. I mean, we're going to start out by talking about serial killer cows, and immediately follow that up with brain-eating microbes which were found in a Texas water supply. And that's kind of the trend throughout the whole episode. Of course, we'll get to the one we missed last time, which is a mom's remains who went missing after they were mailed to the wrong Florida address. And then we're going to wrap up in the third segment by talking about some gross stories, and we'll get there when we get there, if you manage to get there. And then, to keep with the theme, I'm going to give you my top 10 unfortunate, embarrassing deaths. So, not going to lie, it is kind of my preference as to the tone of the episode, but I'm well aware that I have a perverse sense of humor, so let's get to it with serial killing cows. And they aren't just serial killers, they're koala bear serial killers. According to a recent study, cows across Australia have been seen trampling koala bears to death. One man from the University of Queensland is now investigating how damaging cows can be to koala populations, conducting field research in the Grantchester area. Quote, for years, veterinarians, farmers, and wildlife careers across Australia have been reporting serious injuries or deaths of koala bears due to cow tramplings. It's so not funny, but it's so incredibly funny. He goes on to say, quote, this is largely based on an animal autopsy evidence, mainly finding hoof prints on dead koala bodies. They're clearly acting aggressively to these poor animals. By the way, the main motivation for his study is that he's trying to get a PhD. I'm not quite sure in what. Not sure how this data is going to help him at all. But I don't know, he's probably smarter than me. He goes on to say, quote, there are witness statements from farmers confirming that the cattle have been chasing koalas in paddocks, which is like a horse enclosure. He goes on to say, quote, and it seems that while koala populations are significant decline due to deforestation and urbanization, a substantial number of koala habitats are either bordering or overlapping cattle grazing land. I was unaware that cows were so territorial. I just looked it up, by the way, and cows weigh about 2,500 pounds and can run up to speeds of 25 miles per hour. So I guess that's basically like a Nissan Maxima. These poor koala bears are being chased by animals the size of Nissan Maximas. Not even predatory animals. Just ones that are really territorial about their grass. When asked what his goal was in this experiment, he said, quote, we're keen to better understand the interactions between cattle and koalas. In order to work out the likelihood and frequency of such incidents. And if you thought that was ridiculous, this is actually where it gets technical. The man is now using a plush toy koala bear, which he attached to a remote control car, in order to gather data. Quote, right now I'm spending a lot of time in a paddock, attaching a fake koala sprayed with koala urine and feces to a radio-controlled RC car, and driving it through the herds of cattle. Yeah, I'd want to break it too if a little plush toy filled with urine and feces traveling at 30 miles per hour on a race car was running after me. Doesn't sound pleasant at all. Quote, I'm also driving around an RC with a plush dog toy and a regular RC car too. If the cattle react differently to the car with the faux koala, that is They are most aggressive than the regular RC car. Therefore, we can be confident that their reactions are because of the fake koala and not because of the car. He went on to say we'll also be taking an online survey of wildlife careers, recording the occurrence of cattle-inflicted injuries and deaths to other animals. And finally, I will be monitoring changes in koala home range size and location before, during, and after sharing space with cattle, which may reflect their distress caused by the cattle threat. Bulls and cows with calves tend to be more aggressive and protective than cows without calves, so these three groups of cattle will be tested separately. The researchers' results hopefully will inform future management strategies to protect vulnerable koalas from bovine threats to their survival, but also to facilitate emerging forms of agriculture. I don't want to start any controversies, but I think this is mostly the koala bear's fault. You should not invade the space of something that weighs hundreds of times more than you do. It's just a bad strategy. He goes on to say, quote, a koala beef concept is being developed which encourages the preservation of koala fodder trees on grazing lands so that the cattle and koala can coexist. Oh, buddy, why not just separate the two? It'll be fine. If only John Lennon were here today, he'd write a song about this. He went on to say, quote, but so far there isn't any research on this koala-cattle interaction. This research will hopefully enable grazers to protect koalas on their property, maybe even implement new conservation ideas like koala beef, which is his method, with far happier, less threatened koalas. Oh, buddy, just move them to the trees. You don't have to put a tree in the middle of a grazing field just so the koala doesn't get trampled to death quite yet. This is all so silly, but that's better than being tragic. Our next story is downright tragic. Texas residents warned of tap water tainted with brain-eating microbes. I'll try to keep this one short. Texas officials have warned residents that some communities near Houston need to stop using their tap water because it might be tainted with a deadly brain-eating microbe. The Texas Commission on Environmental Quality warned the Biosport Water Authority late on Friday of the potential contamination of its water supply. The commission then issued an advisory warning which told people not to use tap water for any reasons except to flush toilets throughout the Houston area. I think that's close-minded of them. I think water can still be used for torture, you know? In fact, it might be even better now. What else can it be used for? You can ship it to Florida, get rid of some crocodiles and pythons while you're at it. This still isn't funny, though. The communities that are around this area actually involve about 120,000 people who are now not able to drink tap water. Also affected are the Dow Commercial Works in Freeport, which has 4,200 employees, and the Clemens and Wayne Scott State Prison Units, which have 2,345 inmates and 655 employees. Yikes, that's crazy. So 1 out of 60 people in that area are criminals in prison. Anyways, in case this wasn't depressing enough, the advisory will remain in place until Brazosport Authority's water system has been thoroughly flushed and tested on water samples, which will show the system's water is safe to use. It said in a statement that was released last week that it is unclear how long it will be before the tap water is safe. They should do what they did in the UK back in the day, because they didn't have any sanitation or sewer practices, so their water supply was awful. They should just make a bunch of tea out of it. You boil it, it'll be cool. Or you can do the Irish thing and make beer out of it. That's even better. Come on, people, be resourceful. Crisis is just another name for opportunity. Anyway, Nalgleria floweri, which is the name of the microscopic amoeba commonly found in warm freshwater and soil, according to the U.S. Center of Disease Control and Prevention, usually infects people when contaminated water enters the body through the nose, from where it travels to the brain and can cause a rare debilitating disease called primary amoebic mycoencephalitis when it goes through the nose. So here's another solution. Don't drink your water through your nose. God dang, I should write a paper and get a PhD. The infection is usually fatal. Really, the brain-eating microbes are fatal. And this typically occurs when people go swimming or diving in warm freshwater places such as lakes and rivers. So I guess if you ever pointed and laughed at those people who plug their nose before they jump in the water, maybe they're actually one step ahead of us in terms of evolutionary survival tactics. In very rare instances, Nalgera infections may also occur when contaminated water from other sources such as inadequately chlorinated swimming pool water or heated contaminated tap water enters the nose. The contamination of U.S. treated public water systems by the microbe is rare but not unheard of. According to the CDC, the first deaths from Naegleria fleurei found in tap water from the treated U.S. public drinking water systems occurred in southern Louisiana in 2011 and 2013. On top of this, the microbe was also found in 2003 in an untreated geothermal well, which supplied drinking water systems in Arizona, as well as in disinfected public drinking water supplies in Australia in the 1970s, 80s, and in 2008 in Pakistan. So, moral of the story, drink beer and don't drink it through your nose. Next story, this one's a bit happier, but it's also severely stupid. 3 railroad workers built a man cave under New York's Grand Central Terminal. This is also kind of tragic, though, because the 3 railroad employees were suspended without pay for converting a room underneath the Grand Central Terminal in New York City into their own personal man cave. The room was furnished with a wall-mounted TV connected to a streaming device, a futon couch, refrigerator, air mattress, and microwave, according to a report released Thursday by the Metropolitan Transportation Authority inspector, whose name will not be mentioned. This is brutal, man. These are just basic commodities. They were basically suspended for having fun. Quote, "Many a New Yorker has fantasized about kicking back with a cold beer and a prime piece of Manhattan real estate, especially one this close to a good transportation." This is all according to the authority inspector, by the way, who suspended the men. He goes on to say, quote, "But few would have the chutzpah to commandeer a secret room beneath the Grand Central Station terminal and make it their very own. Situation sustained with MTA resources and maintained at our riders' expense." And that's not all. The Office of the Inspector General found in the room a half-consumed beer in the refrigerator and an empty can in the trash. Tragic. They also found a cabinet under the TV that they think was built to hide the TV. They also found a clear plastic bag filled with sheets and a comforter, as well as a cabinet in a locksmith shop storage area that hid a pull-out cot. The MTA is now accusing that there is overwhelming amount of evidence that the 3 Metro North Railroad employees, which are a wireman, a carpenter foreman, and an electrical foreman, used the unauthorized break room service several times. It's unclear if employees used the room while they were on the clock. Nevertheless, all 3 of the individuals were suspended without pay until their disciplinary hearing. Yikes. The room was anonymously reported last year. Somebody ratted them out. The Office of the MTA Inspector General said it received an anonymous complaint in February 2019 about the room. The complaint described the same 3 specific employees would, quote, "hang out and get drunk and party." And then a second similar complaint was made in June 2019. It's unclear when the unauthorized break room was first created and how long it had been in use. Those complaints were headed to the Metro North Railroad Security Department for investigation. Blah, blah, blah. Quote, "The behavior described by the IG's report is outrageously inappropriate and is not consistent with the Metro North's values of the commitment that we have to providing safe, reliable, and cost-effective services to our customers." I like how he slipped an advertisement in there. And after these crazy accusations, it was then that the Grand Central Station management told investigators that they did not know the room even existed, let alone that it was a locksmith storage room. What a bunch of losers. Playing dumb. What room? Officials said that the wiring of the TV and streaming device created a potential fire hazard, and that the, quote, M&R Fire Brigade considers an unmapped room for which no one appears to have the key to be very dangerous. The risk associated with employees hiding in that room when the door is locked create a variety of hazards, including the inability to rescue personnel to quickly access the room. And welcome to 2020, folks, where we stomp on koala bears, get killed by brain-eating microbes, and we are not allowed to have man caves. Alright, stay tuned to the next segment, where I'll give you all the stories I didn't get to in my last podcast, including the mom's remains who went missing after being mailed to the wrong Florida address, as well as a person who lost all their memory after going to a dentist office for surgery. So stay tuned for that, and we're gonna have a good time.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, where after a simple dental surgery, an individual lost their ability to form new memories. So it's said that this young man's internal clock was essentially jammed at 1340 or 1:40 p.m. on the 14th of March 2005, right in the middle of a dentist appointment. Why is the story of this coming out 15 years later? I don't know. The young man was a member of the British Armed Forces, and he had returned to his post in Germany the night before after attending his grandfather's funeral. He had gym class in the morning. I like how the British Armed Forces have gym class still. Do you think they get hazed if they can't climb the rope? Anyways, he had gym class in the morning where he played volleyball for 45 minutes, and then he entered his office to clear a backlog of emails before heading to the dentist's office for a root canal surgery. Quote, I remember getting into a chair, and the dentist inserting the local anesthetic. And after that, a complete blank. And since then, he has been unable to remember anything for almost no longer than 90 seconds. So while he can still tell stories from his childhood, he cannot remember where he is living, to the point where he wakes up every morning still believing he's in Germany in 2005, waiting to visit the dentist. Without a record of new experiences, the passing of time means nothing to him. Today, he only knows that there is a problem because he and his wife have written detailed notes on his smartphone in a file labeled, quote, first thing, read this. According to his wife, it is, quote, as if all his new memories are being written in invisible ink that slowly disappears. How could minor dental work have affected his brain in such a profound way? This real-life medical mystery offers a rare glimpse at the hidden depths of the brain's workings. So the doctors initially suspected that the man reacted badly to the anesthetic, which caused a brain hemorrhage. Yet they failed to find any evidence of this injury, and so he was discharged with a mystery still hanging over him, and the family moved back to England, where he was referred to the office of Gerald Burress, who was a psychologist. And according to this psychiatrist, the young man had formed a, quote, anti-grade amnesia, which is basically the destruction of the malaise on gray matter in the brain, which acts as our memory's printing press, which stamps, quote, episodic memories of events into long-term storage, and without them, we are unable to hold onto anything that occurred after the surgery. But when the doctors re-looked at that area, they did not find any evidence for this at all, and they are now claiming that it's a psychogenic illness, which basically when some patients report memory loss after a traumatic event, which is usually a mechanism they developed themselves to avoid thinking about painful past events, which is kind of the opposite of what's happening to this young man, right? He can remember exclusively past events, he just can't make new memories. And so they were forced to go back to the drawing board. Unfortunately, they had no chalk. They have not the slightest clue why this man cannot make new memories. In fact, in the last 10 years, the young man has been able to learn only one new thing, and that's that his father died. Good lord, what a sad story. Let's move on to something a little more uplifting. A mom's remains went missing after being mailed to the wrong Florida address. Florida story of the week. Jacksonville, Florida. A Kentucky woman is sending out what she calls a, quote, urgent plea after a box containing her mother's cremated remains went missing when she mailed it to her sister in Florida. Oh man, and I thought I had it rough when my Radiohead record got lost. On September 9th, 2020, Amy Redford of Kentucky sent the box via U.S. Postal Service. That was your mistake. She sent it U.S. Postal Service to what she thought was her sister's address in Jacksonville. The box, which had written on it in a bright red label, said, quote, cremated remains. It was delivered the next day, but her sister had moved, and so it was sent to the wrong address. It was then that the young Kentuckian called the USPS and asked for a delivery timeline. According to them, the tenant took the box when the mail carrier knocked on the door. Wow, great investigation, USPS. But according to witnesses, how many witnesses could there have been? The woman who accepted the package seemed to be in a hurry as she was taking an online test. According to witnesses, according to this lady stalker. When the woman realized that the box wasn't for her, she put it outside so the mail carrier could take it, and now it's missing. The young Kentucky lady is now asking people to help her find her package. Quote, getting the word out as much as possible is my best strategy. So that's the sort of thing I've been hoping for. Someone might see something, somebody might know something. She has since emailed trash companies in Jacksonville who have pledged to keep an eye out for the package, and she has stayed in touch with the USPS. Quote, they have done an amazing job here. They literally have been in contact with me every single day. As a matter of fact, I now have the postmaster's cell phone number. I just want to put her in peace. I don't want my mother to end up in some landfill somewhere. So if you see a box that's labeled cremated ashes, make sure you don't toss it in a landfill. Okay, next story. Michelob Ultra offers $50,000 to explore national parks and drink beer. My kind of fundraiser. Okay, so this beer brand is seeking a, quote, chief exploration officer who will essentially get paid $50,000 to explore the U.S. national parks while drinking their very own beer. The company said that the, quote, chief exploration officer, or CEO, will spend 6 months traveling through national parks in a camper van equipped with a bathroom, shower, fridge, and of course the fridge will be filled with Michelob Ultra Pure Gold Organic Light Lager. Sorry, too many buzzwords in one sentence for my small brain to comprehend. The company said that the camper van and gas money will be provided for the CEO, as well as a salary of $50,000 plus expenses. Jeez, that's pretty good. That's a good job there. Quote, we know some people prefer to enjoy the outdoors alone, but if it helps to improve the trip, our CEO is more than welcome to bring along a friend, spouse, partner, or even a puppy dog. The posting said that the company is seeking somebody with a love for the outdoors and a strong sense of direction. Quote, the main thing we're looking for are a deep appreciation for nature, the willingness to hike to the perfect photo op, and the ability to capture engaging content for social media. Oh, and for the love of beer, of course, but that goes without saying, doesn't it, folks? The parks to be visited by the CEO include Yosemite, Sequoia, Joshua Tree, Big Bend, and Saguaro. So everything between California and Texas. Applicants are being accepted through September 30th. Your time is running out, people. You only have 3 or 4 more days to apply for the greatest job ever. Okay, next story. This is another beer story. But it's a bit more involved. Beer cans dropped from an Amish buggy lead to underage drinking charges. So, Pennsylvania State Police have filed underage drinking charges after seeing an Amish buggy driving down the road dropping beer cans last Sunday. The troopers stopped the buggy in Bloomfield around 5 p.m. State Police said that they found a 16-year-old female inside the Amish buggy, and she was highly under the influence of alcohol. She will, of course, be cited through a district court office, and that's all they have on the story, sadly. Since the young lady is under 18, she cannot be reached for comment. But in 2 years, I'll be sure to revisit this super interesting story. Okay, Russia arrests the Jesus of Siberia, which is a cult leader claiming to be the reincarnation of Christ. So this occurred in Moscow, Russia, last Tuesday, and the cult leader, who claims to be the reincarnation of Jesus, was arrested along with his top aides in an operation involving armed troops and aircraft. Goodness gracious, a Waco 2.0. Except they weren't arrested in Waco, were they? The investigative committee, which probes serious crimes, said it had detained the Siberian Jesus, known for his followers as Valerian the Teacher, along with two of his highest prestiged aides. Footage released by investigators shows the 59-year-old man with long gray hair and a beard, and two other men being led by masked commandos from a van and boarding a helicopter. The operation in a remote settlement in Siberia's Krasnoyarsk region, including members of SFB Security Service and other law enforcement agencies. The cult leader said that while he was a former traffic police officer, he experienced a, quote, awakening when he lost his job in 1989, as the atheist communist regime was fast unraveling. So this man clearly suffers from Jerusalem syndrome. In 1991, he found what is now the Church of the Last Testament, and now several thousand members of the Valyrian cult live in remote hamlets near Siberia. One of the followers posted several videos on Facebook which showed army helicopters and vehicles parked in a field. Investigators said that the self-proclaimed Messiah and his aides solicited funds from disciples and emotionally abused them. As a result, the investigative committee is planning to charge the cult leader with organizing an illegal religious organization and causing, quote, 2 or more people to serve harm. And just a little side note, he was once asked how he knew he was the Son of God, and he said, quote, I felt something violently surging up from within me that had been held down until then. And since the formation of the cult in the 1990s, some of the Valyrian devotees died by suicide, and some died as a result of harsh living conditions and lack of medical care. Don't join a cult, people. It's bad. Alright, don't do it. Alright, last story before the break. Saudi Arabia attempts to post bond for a Tulsa Uber driver accused of murdering his passenger. So the driver was held on a $500,000 bond and is accused of first-degree murder on allegations that he ran over his Uber passenger during an altercation last June. But the prosecutor said Thursday that the man's defense indicated that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, of which the man is a dual citizen along with the United States, is trying to provide the funds for his release. So America arrested the man for murder, and Saudi Arabia is paying to get him out of prison. And as a result, the Tulsa County District Attorney filed a motion last Thursday which sought the revocation of the man's bond on the belief that he could flee to Saudi Arabia and avoid prosecution in connection with the murder of his passenger. His defense attorney responded saying, quote, there are no restrictions under Oklahoma law with regard to who can post a person's bail. To make a blanket assertion, since a government is involved, there is a higher risk of flight, which is a tenuous assumption at best. Frankly, it's a case we believe he's completely innocent of and is happy to fight, so I don't think we have anything to run from. And he went on to say that it is admirable that Saudi Arabia has a vested interest in ensuring their citizens' freedom. Alright, I can tell right now this story's not going anywhere, so we're going to cut it off here. Stay tuned to the next section, We're gonna spend 15 minutes talking about the 4 probably grossest stories I've ever covered. The first 3 aren't that bad, they're just kind of odd, but the last one's really something else, something quite disturbing. So stay tuned for all of that, and if you're not in the mood for gross out stuff, then you can go ahead and skip about 15 minutes to the 4th segment, where I will give you my top 10 unfortunate or embarrassing deaths. So please stay tuned for all of that.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, where I'm going to give you 4 really gross stories. We will do them in order from least gross to most gross, so see how long you can manage to stick around. That'll be fun, won't it? And once again, if you're not into the whole gross out thing, then you can wait about 15 minutes. Skip ahead 15 minutes, and you will get to hear my beautiful top 10 unfortunate or embarrassing deaths. A cynical week, no doubt. Alright, the first story. Workers encounter an unrealistically giant rat while cleaning sewers. So this story begins in Mexico City when cleanup crews were said to have lived everybody's worst nightmare. September 18th, they discovered what looked like a monster drowned rat while dredging through the sewers. It was the workers' job to remove litter from the city's drainage tunnels following heavy rains, and it was then that they saw the Buick-sized rodent. That is crazy. During the unsavory gig, the workers reportedly turned a corner and encountered what they described as a giant rat. Yeah, that's pretty big. Which sat hunched over and sported incredibly realistic fur. Oh no, is it not real? As it turns out, the vermin was actually a Halloween prop. Oh, we got gafted. Which had been washed out of its warehouse by the storm. Good gravy. I'm sorry, folks, but I think it was still probably really funny when they saw the thing. I would have freaked out, too. The decoration somehow ended up in the labyrinth network of the sewer tunnels, where it sat undiscovered for years. That's pretty gross stuff. It kind of makes me want to question why these people don't film their encounters down there. I'm sure that would make a viral time. Anyways, a woman named Evelyn Lopez has since come forward to claim the giant rat, which she reportedly created from scratch for Halloween. She says that it had gone missing, quote, years ago during a torrential downpour, and no one could help her retrieve it. Fortunately, Ratzilla, which is the name the lady gave to it, appears to be in safe hands, as a now viral video shows him being hosed off on the street by sewer workers after being rescued from its subterranean lair. Bystanders told the local news that they marveled at the ghost beast's naturalistic appearance, with some claiming that they would have run away in fear if they had seen it on the street. And looking at the video, I can confirm that it's pretty disgustingly real. And eventually the owner came forward, as previously mentioned, to reclaim her rat, but she now claims that she has no idea what to do with her, quote, Princess Bride evoking prop. Social media pundits suggest that she recycles the beasts for the year's Halloween festivities, providing they hose it off a few more times. I don't think that's going to help, but I guess that's up for her to decide. This reminds me of that story, I think it was like from a decade ago, when an alligator crawled out of the sewer in Queens. I like that story a lot. That one's a classic. We'll have to do a classic episode where I go over a bunch of really old weird news stories. But anyways, for now, we're going to move on to an Illinois man who kept an unfinished sandwich for 60 years because it was Richard Nixon's. This is a pretty short one, don't worry. So on September 22nd in Illinois, man celebrated his 60th birthday of a sandwich that he kept frozen ever since it was half eaten by Richard Nixon in 1960. The Sullivan man said that he was a Boy Scout when Richard Nixon visited the town of Sullivan during September 22nd, 1960, during a campaign stop. The future president attended a cookout and ate half of a buffalo sandwich, which the young boy then took home and kept in his freezer. Quote, "I looked around and thought, if nobody else is going to take it, I am going to take it." Kind of a weirdo. But the weirdest thing of all is that this is not the first time his sandwich has gone viral. It was actually brought on to a guest appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny freaking Carson in 1988. That is amazing. You know how many comics literally starved to death working for free doing comedy for decades just to meet Johnny Carson, and then this guy's like, yeah, I have a half-eaten sandwich by Nixon. And then he gets to be on the greatest talk show of all time. Anyways, the man said that his appearance yielded him a half-eaten snack from Carson, as well as a paper plate signed by Steve Martin. That's pretty cool. So now he has a half-eaten sandwich from Nixon and a half-eaten sandwich from Johnny Carson. He can put them together and have a sandwich. That's what I call innovation. It is said that Steve Martin quipped that he had earlier used the plate to eat some chicken salad. I love Steve Martin. When asked if the man had anything else interesting in his storage, he said that his collection includes unfinished foods from entertainers Tiny Tim and Henny Youngman. Good gravy, a lot of great comedians. Fun fact about Henny Youngman, he's actually an old man. Alright, sorry. Nevertheless, he says that the Nixon sandwich remains his crown jewel of his collection. Quote, "As long as I am living, that sandwich will be stored in my freezer in a container that is labeled Save, Don't Throw Away." If you ask me, no crown jewel can be a crown jewel, even metaphorically, if it has to be kept in the freezer. Alright, so I just watched the video of the great Jack Carson having to meet with this guy who saved the sandwich for, at the time it was only 28 years. And you can tell Carson's just wondering what he did with his life to get here. His career was so big, and by the end of it, he was reviewing sandwiches. And then, of course, the crowd is all pissed off because Steve Martin's there. They're like, why can't we listen to Steve Martin? Instead, we have to watch the sandwich guy. You can go online and watch it, but it's really just more cringy than anything. So let's move on to our next grossest story. The second grossest story of the week. Now, if you remember a few weeks ago, we did an Ig Nobel Prize winner. I think that was for a group of scientists who gave helium to an alligator and made it bark for some reason. But I neglected to do this story alongside it because it's just so silly. A man who made a knife from frozen poop won a 2020 Ig Nobel Prize. Of course, these prizes do not go to legitimate scientists, rather those of goofy nature. An example will be the one I aforementioned, as well as a team of researchers who looked at why chewing sounds drive people crazy, which I actually think is a noble study to undertake, but maybe that's just my crazy opinion. Anyway, let's get the story about an anthropologist who tested the urban legend, I've never heard of this urban legend, by fashioning a knife out of frozen human waste. And alongside him was a man who found that spiders obviously give scientists who study insects the heebie-jeebies, both of which won awards in 2020. This is just crazy. So you can go online because the coronavirus pandemic actually forced the award ceremony to be a pre-recorded virtual affair. So you can go online and watch a 75-minute video of it. I'm not going to. It's usually held at Harvard University, as mentioned last time. Anyways, let's get back to this story. So this particular anthropologist claims to have always been interested by the story of an Inuit man in Canada who made a knife out of his own waste. Apparently the story has been told and retold throughout scientist circles. I'm unaware of this. But since it has always been considered a myth, this anthropologist figured that he would test it out for himself. He is not an actual professor of anthropology. He is the assistant professor at Kent State University. Everything's falling into place now. He is co-director of the university's experimental archaeology lab, which used real human waste to minus 50 degrees centigrade and filled a beaker with it, shaving, carving it into a sharp edge. He then tried to cut meat with it. Oh, this is just getting worse and worse. Quote, the poop knife failed miserably. There's not a lot of basis, empirically, for this fantastic story. He then went on to make a point that the study may be gross, but it makes an important point. There are a lot of narratives out there based on phony and unproven science. He's using a myth about frozen poop knives in order to make a statement about taking science seriously. Now look, I think we should take science seriously. I think it's just a bit goofy that this is the particular person who's at the head of this fight. Quote, the point of this was to show that evidence and fact-checking are vital. It was then that he won an Ig Nobel Prize for his paper looking at why people spend their lives studying insects and creeped-out spiders. This is so dumb. His paper titled, Arachnophobic Entomologists, Why Two Legs Make All the Difference, appeared in the Journal of American Entomologists in 2013. So basically, people who like bugs with 6 legs do not like arachnoids, which have 8 legs. This man is a retired research associate and spider specialist, all-around a creepy person, who worked in the entomology department at the University of California, Riverside for 32 years, and found during the course of his work that many insect lovers hated spiders. Quote, it always struck me funny when I walked through the halls and talked to entomologists about spiders. They would say something along the lines of, oh, I hate spiders. It's a bit on the nose. He also found, in case you didn't get enough of this story, that bug lovers had had a negative experience with spiders, including bites and even nightmares in some cases. The fact that spiders are often hairy, fast, and have all those creepy eyes freaks out entomologists, according to this entomologist. Alright, and we're gonna stop there, because believe it or not, it actually gets political after that. So if you're interested in the politics of these crazy people, you can go ahead and research the Ig Nobel Prize winners. So with that, we're going to move on to my 4th story, and I must warn you, this is probably the most disgusting story I have ever covered or will ever cover. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a second if you'd like to skip ahead about 4 minutes. We're going to try to keep it nice and quick for those who want to stick along. But if you want to skip to my top 10, you can go ahead and do that now. But for those who are willing to brave the storm, Vietnam confiscates 320,000 used condoms, which were set to be recycled for sale. Ugh. Okay, so a raid at a warehouse led to the arrest of a woman that she had been paid by the pound to recycle the prophylactics. So the Vietnam police seized more than 320,000 used condoms. That, I feel really bad for the guy who had to count all of those. They seized them while they were being boiled, dried, and put up for sale in a southern province. Goodness gracious, that is awful. Officers who raided the warehouse in the province last Saturday found the recycled condoms in a bag weighing almost 800 pounds. I mean, where do you even get these from? You just put out newsletters that say, ship them here for 6 cents or whatever. Anyways, the state-owned Vietnam television station showed thousands of the prophylactics spilling out of plastic bags on the floor. It was unclear what led to the police raid, but news reports said that officers had received a tip from the local residents. The police arrested a woman in connection with the operation, who told authorities that she had received a monthly delivery from an unknown person, from one person, and had been paid the equivalent of 17 cents for about every 2 pounds she recycled. Lady, that is not worth it. That's like, let me do quick math, that's like less than $70 for the entire 800 pounds. She went on to tell the police of her process, saying that the condoms had been recycled through a series of boiling, drying, and reshaping them using a wooden prosthesis. According to police, it is not known how long the business has been in operation or how many used condoms have been resold. Condoms are designed to be disposed of after use, according to sex experts. to avoid breakage, slippage, or leakage. And those same experts went on to say that recycling used condoms is, quote, very dangerous for society, because for profit, they spread sexually transmitted diseases such as syphilis, gonorrhea, or possibly HIV. This must be prevented. I like how the first thing they mention that's bad is the, quote, for profit. Not the STDs. No, it's the fact that people like money. But the same sex experts went on to say that recycling condoms is not exactly unheard of among sex workers, particularly in developing countries such as Vietnam. Quote, it's not impossible to wash a condom, according to Juliet Richards, a sexual health expert and honorary professor at the University of New South Wales, who said, quote, but it's never happened to my knowledge on an industrial scale. She went on to say that they would be difficult to recycle without equipment to roll up and repackage the condoms to pass them off as new. So she's more concerned about the manufacturing process. She said that it was unclear what impact boiling the condoms would have on their integrity, but I'm sure there's an ignoble prize for somebody who wants to find out. Alright, so we're going to go to a break. Thank God that's over. Stay tuned to the next segment where I'll go over my top 10 unfortunate, embarrassing deaths.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, Top 10 Unusual and Embarrassing Deaths. Alright, let's start with a slapstick one. Arthur Aston at number 10, whose cause of death was that he was beaten to death with his own wooden leg. So Sir Arthur Aston was a lifelong professional soldier, most noted for his support of King Charles I in the English Civil War. He was known at the time as a great soldier who saw a great deal of action during his lifetime. It was in September of 1644 when he fell from his horse and ended up with a wooden leg, which was later used in his murder. In 1649, only 5 years later, Oliver Cromwell's forces attacked his town in the siege of Dorgara and ordered that each and every one be executed. Aston offered to surrender, but the soldiers who captured him believed that he was hiding gold in his leg. So they ripped it off and beat him, not in order to kill the man, but in order to break open the leg so they could find his gold. Unfortunately, of course, the foot was made of solid wood, and it killed Aston. That is so depressing. So if you ever take over a city and you find a man with a wooden leg, and you think there's gold inside of his wooden leg, hit it against a tree, maybe. Alright, number 9. This one's pretty gruesome. Emperor Valerian. So, Valerian was a noble Roman man who became Emperor of Valyrian. During his disastrous reign, however, the Western Empire fell into total despair. It was in 260 AD when the Valerian was defeated in the Battle of Edessa, and then taken captive by the Persian king Shapur I. And this is where things got a little seedy. In order to humiliate the emperor, Shapur used him as a footstool. When he grew tired of his footstool, it was then that Shapur had Valerian skinned and his skin stuffed with dung and straw. It was then put on display in one of the large Persian temples. That is brutal, and that is why you always carry around a suicide pill with you folks, particularly if you are a bad emperor. Okay, Pyrrhus of Epirus. So Pyrrhus of Epirus was one of the greatest conquerors known during his time. His heavy losses in one campaign unfortunately led him to the term Pyrrhic victory, which was coined in his honor. He was known as such a great warrior that the Spartan royal Cleonymus asked him to defeat Sparta and put him on the throne. Pyrrhus was of course defeated, having underestimated the strength of the Spartan warriors, so he moved on to his next campaign in Argos. As he entered the city through the narrow streets on the back of an elephant, an old woman, unhappy with the conflict, threw a roof tile at him from her balcony. The tile stunned Pyrrhus, which allowed a common foot soldier to stab him, killing him. He was killed by a tile. Alright, so the next two kind of go together. So they will be number 8 and 7 respectively, or maybe it's 7 and 6, I don't know. So that's Humphrey de Bohan and King Edward II. So we'll start with Humphrey, who was a member of a very powerful Anglo-Norman family in England, who spoke out against the excess of King Edward II, whom he is paired with in this list, who he is tied with in this list. While leading troops at the Battle of Boroughbridge, Bridge, Humphrey de Bohan, the 4th Earl of Hereford, met with a rather unpleasant end. He led the fight across the bridge, but he and his men were caught in the arrow fire. Then one of his enemies, concealed beneath the bridge, thrust upwards between the planks and skewed the Earl of Hereford through the anus, twisting the head of the iron pike into his intestines, and it is said that his dying screams turned the advance into panic. And both strangely and unfortunately, this was not an uncommon way to go during this period in the Middle Ages. As his tied victim will show, King Edward II. He was King of England for 20 years, 1307 to 1327. It is said that he greatly upset the nobility in England because he preferred low-born citizens and had many, quote, special male friends who received extravagant and expensive gifts. After he abdicated the throne and was in prison, his wife Isabella, who was disturbed by the close relationship the king had shared with many young men in the royal court, brought about his execution in secret, quote, on the 9th of the 11th of October, while lying on a bed. The king was suddenly seized, and while a great mattress weighed him down and suffocated him, a plumber's iron, heated intensely hot, was introduced through a tube into his secret private parts, so that it burned the inner proportions beyond the intestines. Not pleasant, but certainly unfortunate and embarrassing. Let's go back to the more apparently funny ones. How about Eleazar Macubus of 162 BC. His death is told in the Old Testament book of 1st Maccabees. During the Battle of Beth Zachariah, Eleazar thought that he saw the enemy king, Antiochus V, riding an elephant nearby. Thinking he would perform a heroic act by killing the elephant and king at the same time, Eleazar jumped under the elephant and stabbed it in the stomach with his spear. The dead elephant fell right on top of Eleazar, which killed him instantly, and to add insult to injury, it was not even the king's elephant, but rather just a regular soldier's. That is so brutally funny. And ever so ironic, but even more ironic was the death of Julien Offray de la Montier, who was a French doctor, philosopher, and potentially the founder of cognitive science. He believed that sensual pleasures, such as eating, sex, and play, were the sole reason for life, and so he decided to live his life by that principle. He was known to be an atheist and believed that life on Earth was just a farce to be lived and ended in self-gratification. Ironically, he died rather painfully after eating too much truffle at a feast held in his honor by a man he cured of an illness. Eating too much does not sound like a pleasant way to go. We are going to move on now to our number 3 spot. So this man was the ruler of Afghanistan, Humayun Mughal. So he ruled over parts of northern India, Afghanistan, Pakistan from 1530 to 1540, and again from 1555 to 1556. Perhaps not the best ruler in the world. He was a great lover of the arts and astronomy and left behind a great legacy and a conscience. In fact, he is said to be one of the greatest influencers for the great booming time the Middle East had during that age. However, he was also very religious, and this is what led to his death. It is said that he was carrying books from the library when he heard the call of a prayer. It was his habitat and tradition to kneel on one knee when the call was made, and as he bent his knee, his foot got caught in the folds of his long, glorious robes. He happened to be standing at the top of a small flight of stairs, and of course he fell all the way down and hit his temple on a jagged rock, which killed him. The real question is, why the heck was there a jagged rock in the library at the bottom of the stairs? Sounds a bit convenient if you ask me. Alright, number 2. Mitsugoro the Eighth, which was one of Japan's most highly regarded dance/drama actors, so much so that he was declared a national treasure. On the 16th of January, the national treasure decided to dine out on fugu, which is a pufferfish that is highly toxic. And of course, when he was alerted to this, he claimed that he was immune to the poison. The fugu chef who served him said that he simply could not refuse to serve the deadly liver to such an esteemed gentleman who claimed to be immune to such poison. Needless to say, Mutsugoro died within 7 hours of consumption. That is kind of funny, but kind of sad. Fugu has a lot of presence in pop culture now. I think this is one of the main reasons for that, as it is said to be one of the tastiest fish you can buy, as well as easily the deadliest. But anyway, that's that. And our number 1 is somebody who we've featured at least once in our top 10 lists. First, I'm going to give you an honorable mention for Rasputin, who I've also mentioned, I think, 4 times. So I wasn't going to bring him up again as an actual list subject. However, I will mention that he was stabbed several times. I believe he was shot once. Poisoned, of course. Beat to an inch within his life before he was drowned. Really interesting story if you like history. Look up Rasputin. One of the most interesting figures in all of history, if you ask me. But number 1 is not him. Number 1 is the ancient Greek philosopher Empedocles, who was probably best remembered for his classical theory of the 4 elements, as well as for originating the cosmogonic theory of how the world worked. He was also the last Greek philosopher to write down all of his theories in verse form. That's fantastic. Why don't we do that today? Imagine if the Big Bang Theory rhymed every other sentence. That would be brilliant. Legend has it, however, that Empedocles threw himself into an active volcano on Mount Etna in Sicily in order to fool his followers into believing that his body had vanished and that he would return as a god. He was known as a bit of a cult leader by the end of his days. But, of course, unfortunately for Empedocles, one of his scandals survived fury of the volcano, and it was discovered by his followers, which revealed their leader's deceit. Alright, I know we're ending a bit early, but what can you do? I'm out of material, so I'm going to have to just go ahead and thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I hope you've enjoyed your weekend. I will see you Monday. In the meantime, please follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Subscribe to us wherever you can. I think we're on Spotify now, so if that's convenient, why don't you follow us on Spotify? You can also leave us a comment or a review on iTunes and the other mentioned media surfaces. Thank you so much, and have a goddamn good night.